Hi, and welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, the founder and chief exec of Intuitive Talent Solutions. We work with leading transport organisations in the UK and bring them together with a diverse and talented candidate network for interim and permanent roles. The people who know me know that I like to immerse myself in good conversation. And over the course of the podcast series, I will be joined by some exceptionally talented leaders from the UK transport sector to talk about their careers, the industry, leadership, challenges and opportunities, and much more besides. I do hope that you'll join me and that you'll be inspired by my fabulous guests and their intuitive insights. It's my huge pleasure to welcome Mike Roberts, Railway Chaplain for the North West of England, to today's episode of the Intuitive Insights podcast. We're releasing this during week commencing the 13th of May 2024 in conjunction with Mental Health Awareness Week, which is a huge passion of both Mike's and my own. I hope you enjoy listening. I hope there's some learning. Please do share amongst your network if you feel the need to do so. Mike Roberts, Railway Chaplain for the North West, and I am privileged and full of joy to say a very good friend of my own since I came into the rail industry some years ago. It's an absolute joy to welcome you to the Intuitive Insights podcast today.
Thank you. It's 4 years since we were thrust together in a WhatsApp group during the pandemic, and
that's true.
I think if anyone had told us the journey we'd have been on in these 4 years, whether it's the industry or individuals, I think anyone would have believed it.
Absolutely. So we have Simon Higgins to thank for that, don't we? So we'll give Simon a name check in today's podcast. Now we're recording this one in April, but we're doing it with a kind of special focus because we're going to release it during Mental Health Awareness Week, aren't we, Mike? That was kind of, we've said for a while we needed to do the podcast, but what has really kind of given us the momentum is that we would like to release it during Mental Health Awareness Week, and so you can share some of your really amazing experience and pertinent experience with our audience. So just to kind of set the scene in terms of Mental Health Awareness Week, that's been going since 2001. And it exists to increase understanding of mental health and also how mental health problems can be prevented. Now, I know this is a huge part of the job that you do. I had no idea till I joined the railway that a railway chaplain was even a thing. I had no idea. I've seen you take the job and make it into your own over the years that I've known you. And I know lots of people who have benefited from your support and your guidance too. So you are a very special person, and I am delighted that you've joined me. People don't need to listen to me, they need to listen to you. So I'm going to hand over and say to you, Mike Roberts, please tell us your story. Take us back to wherever you want to start and lead us through to present day.
I think whenever you think about your own story, I don't think you ever tell it the same twice, do you? It always sort of changes a bit. And every time I worked out where to start telling the story, I think, oh, but before that, this happened. And so, like, I grew up in the Midlands, not in Birmingham, as people from Tamworth would be very keen to tell you. I ever say, oh, I grew up in Tamworth, and turns out people go, oh, that's in Birmingham, isn't it? And people from Tamworth get very upset. And I was a bit of a geek as a child, I think. I was the class nerd. I was always at the top of the class, kind of thing, academically. What I lacked in social skills and friends, I made up with the fact that I figured I kind of didn't need friends if I got good marks. Okay. And I'll come back actually, but the railway is the place I found friendship with people really for the first time. And then I got to about 16 and I was doing my GCSEs and I became quite ill. And all of a sudden, the 2 years that would have been my A-levels, I was going and doing my A-levels, but I wasn't getting the marks I was used to. I wasn't my brain wasn't working the way it should. And I stopped. I came out of education. Now, I'd always had this plan in my head. I know a few of your previous participants have talked about how their plans haven't always gone the way they expected them to. Me sitting here today was never in the plan of 16-year-old Mike.
No.
And I didn't go to university. My plan had always been to follow what my brother and my sister had done. And when you get people saying I was the first person in my family not to go to university, the first person to go to university, I was the first of my siblings not to. And so I left school in 1999. And it scares me now because I'm working with police officers who, when I left school, hadn't been born. And that's making me feel like I'm getting a bit older.
Yeah, well, don't put the emphasis on the year you left school, Mike, because quite frankly, I feel like I should be going and getting my walking stick and collecting my pension if we start talking about dates.
Whenever you and I have been for a walk, you're always outpacing me by quite a good distance. And if you've never been for a canal walk with Nina Lockwood, you need to book one of those in. It's a unique experience. And she'll take you to see the dismembered hand next to the canal in Chorley.
I went back to look for that with Neve, but it's gone.
So people are going to be asking you about that now.
Yeah.
And I ended up working in a bookshop in the middle of Birmingham, literally 100 yards away from Moore Street Station.
Right.
And I was worked on the counter to start with. I then moved up and I started doing all the admin and the management. I was the one that spent the morning looking for the 31p the till was short by, and I was there for about 2 or 3 years before I eventually went to do my training for ordination in the Baptist church. I became an ordained Baptist minister. I did 3 years in South London. I delayed it, but I got the degree, which I think it's really interesting. I know a lot of people have conversations about degrees and the place in industry and employment. And for me, it was about the skills of sticking things through and learning as much as it was about the content, and also about learning to do my own washing,
which
and
is
things
quite
like that.
An important thing.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to just pause you very briefly because I know, and you and I could talk for hours, and I know we haven't got hours today, but I'd love to know what made the decision. I'm sure it wasn't one thing to go into ordination. Why get ordained? Where did that come from?
You know how when I would never imagined I was going to tell this story because it's not exactly the one that makes me out to be cool. When kids are 5 and 6 and playing, being footballers and everything like this, that was what I wanted to do.
Oh, really?
There was something in there that thought, and I look back and my grandmother, my dad's mum, was massively formative in it. And someone said to me, who I knew way before I went, that you don't join the clergy if there is anything else in the world you can be happy doing.
Right.
Because it's not a job, it's a vocation.
It's very much a vocation, yeah.
And like, I know you've got a good friend up near you in Lancashire who's just retired as a clergyman.
Yeah.
And sort of that thing, and it's so hard because it becomes your life. The life, the boundary between work and not work becomes
it's not a job, is it, Mike? It's just not a job, it's a way of life.
And I went and I trained and I did 12 years in the Baptist church. I was I did my training in South London. I lived in Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. I don't let on to the people in Lancashire now that I used to live in Yorkshire because they wouldn't trust me. And then I moved to Dorset and Bournemouth. And then in 2010, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And it was a very dramatic diagnosis. I was apparently almost, if I'd waited a couple more hours, apparently I wouldn't have made it.
Oh my goodness!
And
right.
I was in intensive care. They were there were tubes everywhere and stuff, and it wasn't a fun period of life, and it led me to take a career break. Well, it led me to take a break from everything really, and just focus on health. I had a fall. I managed to break my hip. I'm a proud owner of an NHS artificial hip.
Right. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, it's due its 15-year service this year. And so yes, all that happened. I moved back with my mum and dad when I was 32, which my mum says the lesson she learned is when you get the option to downsize, take it before they move back. And
very important lesson.
So she said we talked about downsizing about a year before you move back, and it puts that decision into a whole new light.
Yeah.
And then as I got better, I met Rebecca, who is now my wife. I often feel sorry for her because she gets talked about to a lot of people on the railway who I don't think very many of them have met her at all.
No.
And she was in the process of being a curate in the Church of England.
Right.
So you invite us round for dinner, but invite one vicar, you get one free. And we had this whole conversation about, well, what would happen if we got married? What would happen if we sort of decided to spend the rest of our lives together? Would we ever see each other if we were both leading churches? So I said, well, I was going to go and look for something different. And I found Railway Mission.
Right.
And it's definitely different.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I'd never worked on the railway before. I'd travelled on it a lot. My dad was a big railway fan.
Right.
And when I was a little kid, he used to, when my mum had enough of me crying and whinging, he used to walk me down to the local level crossing on the West Coast Main Line, and we'd watch the trains go past, and I'd point. And Instagram not being around in 1985 meant it missed a whole generation of me pointing at trains.
Like we've got wee Archie now, haven't we? Waved at them and they pumped their own at him. Yeah.
There's a picture of me on Batty Moss when I was about 6 years old, standing in front of Ribblehead Viaduct with almost offensively short shorts on that.
I'm sure they were fashionable then.
Well, I don't think fashion was never my big thing, but and so I'm like, and I grew up liking watching trains, but sort of with dad, and it became part of what we shared. But then I got applied for this job, not really. Have you ever had someone tell you they've applied for a job without really knowing what it was? And that was me. That. Yeah. Well, you started a business.
I know. I'm still doing it, Mike. I'm still in that realm.
And I went through the interview and still didn't know what the job was. And like you said in the intro, it's a job where you make it your own. And I joined the railway in August 2018. So I've done nearly 6 years now. And I said basically that's split to 2 years pre-pandemic, 2 years pandemic, 2 years post-pandemic.
Yeah.
And so it's a good time to look back now and think this has been, I reckon I've seen the amount of change in the industry in 6 years has been huge. And the railway became a place that gave me a new lease for life. It gave me a passion for people and a place where people accepted me. And sort of I was part of the team.
The sense of belonging, isn't there, Mike?
Yeah.
Do you know that there's this phrase that's used quite often and has its own hashtag these days of railway family?
Yeah.
And to say how many thousands of people work in this industry, it still feels like everybody knows everybody else. and there is that sense of belonging that you're part of something much bigger.
And the thing about the family metaphor as well that works is if you look around your family, you've got the people you see all the time, the people who, even when you don't see them all the time, you just click back with, and you've got the weirdos. And the railway is absolutely that. The railway, every
That's
place.
A very good metaphor.
You've got the people that you can see once in a while that absolutely you see and you pick straight up from.
Yeah.
But then you've got the people who are sort of you can just catch up with and you'll never see again. And then, like everywhere, you've got the people that you think, well, you're strange.
Yeah, the more interesting ones.
Yeah, yeah. Add their names into the chat box now.
Brilliant. So you have made it your own. You kind of, I guess, and splitting it up like you just have done into 2 years before the world went bonkers, the 2 years of the global pandemic and the lockdown, which, you know, somebody mentioned something to me yesterday, and it was about, 4 years ago, and it was like, what? No. It can't be for you. It feels surreal to me, Mike. It feels like it didn't actually happen and it was a film that I watched or a dream that I had, but it wasn't really real. So the impact of that, you now then 2 years afterwards, we're still very much feeling, aren't we?
One of the things that made it really interesting was the pandemic almost started with a straight line, a definite date. That date where Boris sat in Downing Street and said, I must tell you all now to stay at home, and did that. And it started, and we can say on this date in March, the pandemic started for us.
Mm.
But there was never a date when it finished.
No.
It was like it just tapered away. And like, what are we doing now? Like, people sort of still will occasionally test, and they'll stick their COVID test on Twitter or whatever we're calling it now.
Yeah.
And it's like this reminder, it's still there, but this word it's gone from being pandemic to endemic. It's become like flu, and actually, it's just something we live with now.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
And I guess part of the pandemic was one of the reasons we had started to have these conversations about mental health, because it absolutely was the place where some people's challenges around mental health were forged, around time without colleagues, times without friends around them. We all did those Zoom pub quizzes, and we all sort of, it was a novelty in April. It was fun in May. We were missing the real thing by June.
We were.
But it just kind of, if you look at the mental health statistics for sort of 2018 and 19 through today, this curve that's just gone up in terms of GPs reporting people on antidepressants, people that are consulting employee assistance programs about depression and anxiety, and just the cost to the economy of mental health has shot right up in this pandemic, post-pandemic, whatever we're going to call it, era. And these figures from Mental Health First Aid, UK Mental Health England, say that now 1 in 4 people experience mental health issues each year. I think that figure is probably a little light now.
I think it is, Mike.
I think if I think certainly on the railway it would seem to be. And then the statistics in terms of, I know a lot of the senior industry leaders who listen to you, Nina, are driven by data and numbers as well in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And these facts, it says 72 million working days lost, and a cost of £34.9 billion each year. The total cost of mental ill health in the UK, £105 billion.
Yeah.
I can't even work out. You know, when they talk about geographical areas and they say an area the size of Wales, in money terms, I can't even work out what £105 billion is.
No. And it's a really good point, because if you are, as a leader of any organisation, we would hope that there was enough compassion to be concerned about these mental health figures and statistics, because we're concerned about individuals' well-being. But even if you're not concerned about that, then you really should be concerned about the cost that it's having for your organisation due to the number of sick days that people are having to take.
And that's the most positive stat that you can come up with, is the fact that they say for each pound you spend on mental health prevention and well-being work, about keeping people well, you get back £5 back in terms of increased productivity, reduced absence. And sort of, and if you went into Dragon's Den and said, I want £100,000 and I will give you £500,000 back, they're going to take that deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's my my thing. Like the pandemic has created this awareness of some of the issues that are going on. But like when we spoke and planned this, and I sent you some notes, more data has come out since then. The curve around suicide has just, data came out last week, and we've seen that curve going back up. And in the UK, 3 times as many people die by suicide as they do in road accidents.
Yeah, that blew my mind, that statistic.
And when we then talk about how much effort we put in making the roads safe, like you think about when we had this conversation when we had the conversation a few years ago about smart motorways in the public, and are they safe? And the data came out, they said actually they're causing more. And what happens? The government say, well, within a couple of days, we're pausing this. We're going, and actually, how are we taking the suicide?
Much bigger issues are happening, aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've said to me as well is that, because we are seeing more awareness, aren't we? We are seeing, there's brilliant things that the industry are doing. Wellbeing Wednesday, for a start. There's loads of stuff that is happening. But it's also a really good point that you've made to me in the past, that we can't just give people a badge and say, because you've been on a mental health first aider course, then great, crack on. You know all you need to know now. You've been on the course, tick the box. There is so much more that needs to be done. And I'm wondering, because I absolutely know that you are aware of lots of positive things that are happening, and I'd love you to share some of those with the audience. But I'm kind of thinking, does that sit into one of the 3 wishes that I need to grant you? Because I can't invite you onto the podcast and not get my magic wand out. So in terms of the positive stuff, Mike, we know there's an issue. We know that, I think you've used the term to me, that there is an industry depression that's going on. People are tired and worn out by everything that's gone on over the last 4 years and continues to rumble on. But I know that there are lots of good things happening. So I can give you 3 wishes, but I'll leave it with you to decide. Tell me the good stuff before, during, or after, but make sure we share the good stuff.
Let me tell you a couple of good stories and of stuff that's going on. And we start in Liverpool. At Merseyrail, they have got an employee engagement manager, Hannah, who came to the railway new she'd worked at LNER in their comms team years ago. She then went and managed Tesco, a branch of Tesco's in Liverpool. And now she's gone across and she's working as employee engagement manager for Merseyrail, and she will absorb the good things from anywhere around. She will love to take on board. Like, she's part of the Merseyrail, part of the Transport UK family. So they're linked in with EMR, West Midlands, Greater Anglia, and there's that. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but she's also got one of the most creative minds I know. in that she will, like, she won a Rising Star Rail Benefit Fund award earlier in the year.
Yeah.
She will pick up some of these new things, and she will turn up and do. She will get huge responses in the stuff she does. And one of the things we've worked with her is do mindfulness with staff who work by themselves. So Merseyrail have got almost all of their stations are still staffed, still got people in the ticket office, but a lot of them are single person ticket offices, so they work by themselves. So some of the station managers have said, how do we support lone working? And one of the things we've done is we rolled out a session I did around mental well-being and mindfulness, and we gave them all. I wrote a journal for them. They had it printed, and everyone got the. And it was about having a place each day you could assess how you're doing. Yeah. And we gave them a picture of a battery, and they highlighted where they were up to. We gave them a collection of emojis, and we said, which emoji are you up to? And we said, you write down here, if you're scrolling through Instagram and you see those people who put inspirational quotes, how do you do that? How do you remember those? Because once you scroll past it, it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
I did like yours this morning, and you'll be able to date when we recorded this, that said, it's only Wednesday, but it feels like I've done the whole week already. And
I felt like that dog looked on that post, believe you me.
Yeah, and that just made me smile. But this idea about how do you support staff who spend 10 hours a day by themselves, and the challenges for mental health are huge.
Yeah.
And that has led on to a conversation with Northern.
Yeah.
And there, because obviously recruitment for ticket office staff was halted last year, a lot of it because of the ticket office reform stuff that came out. They're now retraining. As part of their training, we're going in and talking about mental health. We're talking about what does it mean for you to have good mental health if you're a shift worker whose day can start at 3 or 4 in the morning or finish at 1 at night. And we're talking about good sleep, good diet, financial well-being.
Yeah.
There's not many places still pay 4 weekly, but the railway does. And the people that come into the railway having been paid monthly for 30 years, and all of a sudden they've got to learn a new way to manage their finances.
Yeah.
And that can throw out your mental health.
Yeah. So it's a really good point. Yeah.
Good diet, good sleep, good relationships with people, working out what does it mean if you get up at 3 in the morning to go to work, when do you eat your breakfast? And I don't know the answer to that, because if in doubt, I just eat constantly.
Just to ward off any risk.
Yeah. If in doubt, have a chocolate digestive.
Tunnocks, caramel wafer for me, right? But yeah, we're on the same wavelength.
I think you're appealing to Nigel Harris's good choices there, aren't you?
We share a love of Tunnocks.
And so we've started to do that. And now on day one, they start at 9 o'clock in Northern to talk about ticket office training. At 1 o'clock on day one, they get my dulcet tones talking about mental health.
Right.
And and that to me has been a real positive. My final positive of the 3 good stories is at TPE. I want to talk about a lady called Debbie. Now Debbie has come in as she's got an occupational health background.
Right.
She's got a clinical background, and she has been able to really professionally support staff across the business and say, I understand this. And it's gone from being a company that's distant, and there's still the place for all the medical and stuff and all that outside, but she's got that clinical knowledge to bring well-being as the whole package.
Right.
And that's been a real gift for me over the last year. And I know for a lot of the leaders at TPE as well, that they're saying we need something professional here in terms of how we support staff. and that visibility, and that staff are able to come and rely on her, and they do trust her. And trust is a massive thing in well-being and mental health.
Yeah, even being prepared to trust in the first place.
Yeah,
that you are allowed to say, and it's actually okay to say. And we talk about the psychological safety in this respect, don't we? It's absolutely fine to say, I'm struggling, I'm not coping. Can I sit down and talk to you? Can I have some help? Can you point me in the right direction? Because as an industry, we've got fantastic safety record in terms of the railway and how it runs. And, Network Rail's biggest mantra, that safe home every day, everyone, every day. And so we know what that means in terms of physical safety, but the mental safety, the psychological safety is critical too, isn't it?
And just, let's shout out the RSSB, because they've just done this policy, this health and safety strategy structure, and they've chosen words that are really hard to say together. Sort of, I want to challenge you to say safety strategy structure after you've had a couple of gins on a Saturday night.
I don't think I'd be able to say it anyway, irrespective.
And Gemma Lavery, who's head of professional standards, was talking to her about it. I quoted her a bit of something she'd said. And it says something along the lines of, we need to treat health and well-being with the same seriousness that we treat safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's this psychological safety, that are people safe to come to work and to turn up? Are they safe to do what they're being asked to do? Are they being safe to say, well, what do I do next? What goes on? Can I contribute beyond what I'm doing? And then finally, can I challenge? And sort of, I'm looking at you, for example, and when I first got to know you, Intuitive was a little team of, was it four? When I started, when it was Gaynor, Caroline, you and Kelly.
That's right.
And the famous, the fabulous four, Fab Five, whatever. And I think each time you've employed someone else, I've sent you a message with a new name.
We get a new hashtag, don't we?
And you look at what you've grown into, and now you look at people like sort of Mel, who is new to your business, and have you created a space where she can say, do you know what? You guys have been doing this for years and you've always done it this way. But what about, and I think knowing you probably have, but how do we create spaces where people can come in and challenge the way that things have always been done?
Yeah. Do you know what's important there as well? And I definitely do not get this right all of the time, or even some of the time, is making sure you've got the space to listen to people. So when you're in a management or a leadership position and people in your team have got really great ideas about how we might do this differently, they can only tell you. You might have created an environment where they feel that there is the psychological safety that I can tell you, actually, I've had a really good idea, Nina, could we do this differently? But if I don't stand still long enough and give them the airtime and the opportunity for me to listen to those good ideas, that's not going to happen. And I think as a society as a whole, and I'm certainly wrapped up in this, we're so busy. Do you know, like one thing into another? When do we stop and listen? When do we stop to think? When do we stop to breathe? Which all then kind of links in with the mental health and well-being.
And busyness is an absolute barrier to creativity and innovation.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
And busyness, is absolutely also a contributing factor to mental health. I travelled home yesterday with 4 members of staff from a train company who'd been working in head office. And the discussion as we were getting to the station where some of them were getting off was how many of them were getting home and turning their laptops on at night.
Yeah.
And I said I might, but it's only to get iPlayer. And I think I put I'm like, one of them works in well-being. I said, how do you do this and then go home and come back to work and tell everyone else to find their work-life balance?
Yes.
And
yes.
sort of, how do we recognize that we talk about delivering mental health well-being to frontline staff, but how do it's going to work if they model it?
Yes.
Managers have to model it.
Completely
and I've seen directors come in, and what they model will inevitably trickle down. So if you have a manager who is a bully, that then flows down that the middle managers think that's acceptable.
Yeah.
You'll see your directors model it, your senior leaders copy it, your middle man, and before you know it, you've got a toxic workforce.
Yeah. And equally, it happens the other way, doesn't it? Where we have people like Damien Shabas, who's the MD at Manchester Metrolink, at Keolis Amy Metrolink, to give them their full title. So me and Faye were delivering a session to some of Damien's team as part of their International Women's Day activities. And one of the team in the discussion provided an example of when she had been on a Teams call with Damien and some other people, senior people from the business, and she had a poorly child off nursery, and the child was getting upset in the background, and this member of the team was having to kind of keep going over there and coming back. And Damien decided, well, do you know what? We're just going to reconvene this meeting. You've got more important things to do, so we're going to reconvene this meeting. This is not that important. We'll come back to it. And that, quite simple thing to do, but speaks volumes in terms of his acknowledgement that there was other things that she needed to do that day.
Then the goodwill that is built up from that and the positive psychological safety that's built up from that means that when they're having a Keolis Amy crisis in a month's time, and it's happening at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and it has to be resolved then, she's going to come back and say, no, it's fine. My mum's here. She can keep an eye on the baby.
Yeah.
Let's get this nailed now.
Yeah. Really good point. We're all in it together. And I just think that the more examples that we can hear of people in that, they're kind of, the senior management positions, the director level positions, who are demonstrating what work-life balance looks like, what family time looks like, and I know with Damien, I would never phone him after 5 o'clock because I know that's his family time. Yeah. So it's just that kind of stuff where we need to see things demonstrated. Really mindful of your time, because I said earlier I could sit and talk to you all day. 3 wishes, Mike. If you ruled the world and you could change anything in the rail industry, what would it be?
I only want one.
Okay.
And it's interesting because we've talked about, we've used this phrase rail recovery a lot, and you and I both sat and listened to the rail minister and the shadow rail minister at the George Bradshaw lecture earlier this year, and we listened to, I think, some woolly words, I think are fair to say. And it was all very up in the air about what it's going to be. And they both talked about fixing the railway and rebuilding back the railway. And we can talk about performance and infrastructure, but I think my wish is that we actually put some serious time into fixing the people.
Yeah.
Because I stood on Manchester Piccadilly Station in June 2020. Was it June 2022 when we had the first RMT strikes? And I asked a senior leader, I said, how does this end? When I was looking at, now obviously Network Rail, their dispute has ended in terms of that. But I said, how does this finish? And he turned and he said to me, I'm not sure, but I hope what is the end is that the frontline staff and my managers are still talking to each other. And that was his fear, that actually relationships break down.
Yeah.
Because you can have the best trains, the best infrastructure, But if the people don't work,
no,
it's all screwed.
exactly. Yeah.
And with mental health, I think we've started the conversation. I think in some places we've started it as a theoretical conversation, and we need to ground it.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a bit like, for years we've had that little 2 seconds of B-roll of a HS2 train going over the computer generated one, and we've said this is, but actually we still feel like we're a long way away from anything running. It's a bit like that with mental health. We've got the badges, we've got the program, we've got the mental health.
We're talking about it, aren't we? At a
and
level.
How do we ground it? That's my question, and it's a question. If you know the answer to, then if someone tells you what the answer is, get them on the podcast.
Because I think there are probably many, many answers, aren't there? And I think what we're attempting to do in this conversation is bring it higher up the list.
Yeah.
But I think it's like everything to do with the people agenda, Mike, is that we have to keep repeating the same message over and over again until we get to the point where we're seeing something change, because nothing changes unless it changes.
And when we've got organisations like the RSSB saying we need to put mental health right up there at the top, and it's really easy for sort of execs to do initiatives and stuff, but my question is, are we willing to have a mental health conversation, a dialogue? Because we've all had those conversations with people where, when someone rings you up, you put the phone down, you look, it says you've had 45 minutes on the phone, and you think, but I didn't say anything. And I think I've done that to you on numerous occasions.
I'm sure I've done it to you.
And you look and you think, sort of, that was, and we've got to make sure that mental health isn't an initiative, it's a conversation. Because what's a mental health challenge for someone on the platforms at Preston Station is not the same as it is for the MD in Manchester, Birmingham, or London.
Yeah,
it's not the same as what it is for me in Blackburn and you in glorious Chorley.
The metropolis.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is absolutely it. It's got to be this comment. We're getting there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And what do we say now to people who are like, let's look at people who are Neve's age. So Neve is what now, 21?
She is.
I think I still remember seeing the party pictures.
Yes.
And so she is the age now where she is making those choices about that are going to affect her career once she finished. Now, there are people for who that choice at that age, for who that option is the railway. How do we start them off so that their career is a psychologically, a mentally, and a physically safe place where they don't want to leave? Branson used to, in the Virgin days, used to say, help people become the people that can go and do anything they want, but treat them so well they don't want to go anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
How are we doing that mentally, mental health? And how are we making sure that up here, I want to come back tomorrow? And that's my wish, that we actually put some serious time, thinking, and money into it.
Agreed.
And say, let's sort this.
I think that you have made a very passionate plea. I'm hoping that the people who listen to this can reflect on what they could do differently in terms of themselves and their own mental health, and looking after that, and thinking about the things that make them feel better and help them cope with the day. You know, for you and I, we love a walk. So, and our walk, when you walk and talk with someone else, is always good for you. For a lot of people, that means putting some music on. There may be playlists for different moods that you might be in. For me, reading a book is always a way of kind of losing myself in somebody else's story, if it's a fiction book, or learning something different from a non-fiction. Which brings me to my final question, kind of sharing some of that stuff there. And Mental Health Awareness Week this year, I understand, is all around movement and the importance of moving, which helps you with your mental health, being outside in nature, but actually moving. So exercise being a thing. You and I share a love of a sticky bum, so that might be another thing. But the final question of this conversation for today is around what inspires you, Mike. I've had the pleasure of getting to know you over the last 4 years, and you inspire me with your passion for other people, with your awareness and your compassion, actually. But some days when you wake up and you think, do you know what? I just want to pull the covers back over my head today. Can't be bothered. Don't want to get up. Don't want to go out in the rain or the cold or the whatever. What inspires you? What gives you the energy that you have to keep going and keep making a difference?
I won't lie and say that on occasion when I do want to do that, and pull the covers back over, there have been days when I've done it.
Yeah.
I've been on antidepressants on and off since I was 17. Which I know you look at my face and you think, well, that's only a matter of months.
Baby.
Yeah. And my mental health, it's strange because actually some of the things that are good for my mental health aren't things that come naturally to me. So when I do get out and the station for me is 1.5 miles away.
Yeah.
And I make my best efforts to walk it, because actually that allows me to put that barrier back up in my head between work and home.
Yeah.
So I can process the day. But when you ask me what inspires me, it is the who inspires. Right. And I'm really fortunate in this role that I get people from top to bottom of the industry who will talk to me. The people that are sort of financially have lots of zeros and people with less. And I think one of the things that I've come to realize is I've met some amazing leaders, but the people that inspire me are the people whose names you will never know. The people who don't get the shout outs on LinkedIn. And I did it the other week. We had a chaotic day in Preston, and I shouted out on LinkedIn to Jess, who is a CSA, who'd spent the day loading replacement buses. By the end of the day, she looked like a drowned rat in the rain, and she will not thank me for saying that. But do you know what? She changed the day of so many people for the better.
Yeah.
And so my inspirations are those people who just keep doing the job.
Yeah. They turn up every day and keep doing that great job. And there are literally thousands of them, aren't there, across the network. Thousands of people who are showing up as their best selves every single day.
And I could take you and sort of meet you, introduce you. I got on. I had a late morning yesterday, and I didn't get. Tuesday. I didn't get on the train till 10:20.
Right.
And as I got on, as my conductor released the doors and got off, it was Amber. Amber is one of my Blackpool conductors for Northern.
Right.
And I felt a little bit guilty because by the time I got on the train, she'd been from Blackpool, had been to York on the train, had her break and worked it back.
Right.
And I was like,
and you rock up at 10:15.
I not rock up at 10:15, and she's still like, and I'm still sort of trying to assimilate my first coffee. And so she's
great. Been doing it. And you and I share that, I think, in that terms of being getting our energy from other people and being inspired by people who do a flipping hard job day in and day out, but still do it in the majority of cases with a smile on their face. Mike Roberts, thank you. Thank you so much. We have proved many, many times that we can talk much longer than we have done this morning. But I am mindful of your time because I know that you've got other people to go and inspire yourself today. So huge thanks from me to you for taking the time to join me on the podcast. I have loved our conversation. Thank you. My heartfelt thanks to Mike Roberts, Railway Chaplain for the North West of England. Mike is one of those very special people. I could talk to him for hours with his words of wisdom, and I'm hugely appreciative of him joining me on today's podcast. And I'm hugely appreciated you joining us too. Thank you very much for your support, as always.